It's the third Saturday of the month, which means the Game Club crew comes together to talk about yet another game. I'm your host, Boston. Joining me as always is Moonpir.
Hello all.
And MusiM.
Hey.
I was honestly expecting you to say MusiM's name first, and I don't know why.
Gotcha. Keep you on your toes. This month we're going to be talking about Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons, which is likely and hopefully the most depressing game we'll play in 2019.
Oh, I don't know. Did you play last month's game?
Yeah, man, the two of them are fighting it out, duking it out for saddest video game title.
Already forgot what we played last month.
The last day of June.
Yeah, last day of June.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the other sad one. Let's talk about the game a little bit. Released on August 7th, 2013, and then sort of every couple of months trickled out onto other platforms. Published by 505 Games, developed by Starbreeze Studio. Time travel. Metacritic 85, OpenCritic 81. Metacritic this time is an average. It sort of ranged from 90 to 81, so... peers for the release date, Dragon's Crown, which got press for a much different reason.
Yep.
Papers, Please, which was another huge indie hit. Spelunky got its proper release after the Game Jam version when they went back and redid it. That came out on the next week. So, DuckTales Remastered. The dubious honor of Plants vs. Zombies 2, which, boy, that was a release, if anyone doesn't remember that. And lastly, Saints Row 4, which is a great video game.
Wow. That's what I would have
Collect those agility orbs.
Yeah,
that whole... And that was mostly, just 2 weeks in August. That wasn't even the whole month or, the whole quarter. That was just... You can keep going for that whole month, and it was insane. So 2013 was good.
I have a question. Is this game partially responsible for Generation 2 of the rebirth of indies? Because we saw with the 360 release, Geometry Wars came out. I know people who bought PGR just to play Geometry Wars.
Right.
We had a big, huge spat of big indies. Braid, Geometry Wars, a whole bunch of others. Then a couple of years of lackluster indies. And then all of a sudden, just look at the names you just dropped as a bunch of indies coming out in the same week. Spelunky is one of the most highly regarded roguelikes out there.
Right.
This
Papers,
game came
Please
out.
was huge.
Yeah. Was this part of that whole thing where it's indies are back? They never went away, but it seems like this was the thing where everyone has started talking about indies again.
It certainly seems like it. Because you're right, there was this big, Braid came out, and it's oh my god, indies. And then there was a lot of good stuff, especially, you're bringing up the right point, that Xbox Live Arcade had an incredible amount of indies that were coming out pretty constantly. And yeah, I think you're right. After a while, people were yeah, boy, if only there weren't some great indies coming out until... August 2013, basically.
So I just kind of Googled it real quick just to see what else. Gone Home came out in 2013, evidently.
Wow, okay.
I bet there's another one or two. I feel in the indie thing started. Obviously, indies didn't start with Braid and all that, but... I feel
they got a lot of big heat.
The momentum for them started then, and I feel like it...
Oh, man.
I mean, did it ever actually, let up?
I don't think it let up, but I think, the mainstream press coverage of it, died down, because we had, 2 or 3 solid years of, Boston said, the Xbox Live Arcade, that was the place you went to get the best indies of that year. And then we had 5 years where it was oh, come on.
There's a lot of stuff coming out that's good, but nothing So here's this list of top indie games of 2013. These all came out in 2013. Amnesia, A Machine for Pigs.
Oh, wow.
Proteus, Rogue Legacy, Towerfall, Papers, Please, Surgeon Simulator. Let me load up second page here. Analog, Hate Plus, Castles in the Sky, Gone Home, Antichamber, Jesus, The Swapper, The Stanley Parable, and Depression Quest.
So
2013 had all the indie games that
amazing
basically
year.
didn't come out when Braid came out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, with that, we always ask the same question every month, and this is taking all of 2013 into account. Top of the pile, middle of the pack, or overlooked?
MusiM, you go first.
This question is always weird to me, but I think it's probably top of the pile. Like, this was a critical darling at the time. I mean, I'm sure everyone remembers everyone giving Brad crap for, I bet there aren't 10 games better than Brothers this year.
Yep.
And, like, it's a nice 2 to 4 hour game that you really, I think the primary reason to play is the ending, which is just heart-wrenching, but delivered in a way only a video game can.
Right.
Yeah. And, well, yeah, at the time, it was definitely top of the pile. It was one of those things where it was like we just discussed, it was the year of indies. Like, everybody was talking about, like, most of those games you just named were headline after headline after headline. That entire year was, this game's come out and it's amazing. Let's do a retrospective and find out why this game is so great. Let's talk to the developers of these games. It's like, this was definitely one of those games that was just like, I'm going to sit there and everyone's going to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And I hate to use this because it tells a story in a video game an
actual story.
Yeah, and I love Saints Row 4. I adore that game. The courting system in that game is particularly hilarious. But the story on it, it's not exactly going to punch you in the gut, you know?
Right.
The most effective moment for me is I Need a Hero playing when you have to make the decision between who you're going to save at the end.
I mean, you didn't cry when you died in the intro of Saints Row 4.
No, I did not. But, you know,
you laughed more than anything else.
I thought I Need a Hero was Saints Row 3. Am I wrong? Isn't that where you have to decide between Shawnee
You might be right.
Pierce? God,
I feel like the two of those just mush into one game for me.
Well, yeah, they kind of do.
Yeah.
But yeah, like everyone was talking about this because it told a story. And it tells it well. It's... Oh boy, yeah.
I'm actually going to go with middle of the pack for this one. I think mostly because I think it was a big flash in the pan for a little bit. Like, video game stories, they can be art. You know, that was still the big argument at the time. And then you look at stuff that's a lot longer lasting, like Papers, Please, and from a legacy standpoint, Papers, Please, and from a gameplay standpoint, Spelunky. And I think you can look at those two polls and see games that have a longer legacy. And I think Brothers is a good game that I think just gets sort of missed a lot in 2013's indie releases and releases overall.
Yeah. It probably doesn't help that we listen to all of us are fans of Giant Bomb. Mm-hmm. And like MusiM said, that Brad
putting on the soapbox.
Yeah, he was singing the praises for this game all year, and then he got his handcuffs out and put himself on the radiator when it came to Game of the Year time. I was like, no, this game is going on the top.
This is where I die.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about the game itself, what we liked, what we didn't like. Fair warning here, it is a fairly short game, 4 hours or less. So we're going to talk about spoilers because it's mostly puzzles and story. So let's start off with, I guess, what we liked. Let's, Moon, why don't you pull something out of the hat here?
Okay. So I think I'm probably going to be the most negative out of all of us in regards to this game. I like the fact that it takes a non-standard control scheme. It's not...
Yes.
It's not ideal. It's not the perfect control scheme. It has its issues, especially with the way my brain works. Yeah. But the fact that it's non-standard helps it to have that moment at the end of the game that I'm sure we'll get to eventually.
Yep.
Just the fact that you play the game with these non-standard controls and you struggle, and then all of a sudden you guys are doing figure eights because your mind's got confused over to which controller is which. It's all for payoff for one moment, and it works. It works because it's different to everything else that's coming out. And even to this day, there's not really a whole lot that can be said that actually uses a different control scheme and then uses it to a really effective point.
I actually wrote down in my notes that it feels like an experimental game that would have come out on the PS1 in Japan, like when the dual analog controller came out before the DualShocks. Someone would have been like, how about we control two characters? It would have been like a Milk and Honey spin-off for the PS1. And I kept trying to think of other games that controlled like this, or even sort of similarly. I don't really come up with anything.
I mean, it's singularly unique. Like, I was reading an interview earlier with Joseph Ferris, however you say his name, and he was claiming in the interview that he had thought up how he wanted it to control. I'm assuming he just had thought up each stick will be a different brother, and just showed up at Starbreeze, like, after being a Swedish director for a while. I was like, I want to make this game. Here's what I want it to be, and here's how I want it to control. And then they started making it, and evidently he just had to kind of stand his ground on, no, this has to be controlled this way. And they had a lot of, I guess, issues with defining the camera during development.
I read a different interview with him, and us talking about indies being so hot in 2013 makes this interview a little bit more interesting in context. He had actually first pitched this to Microsoft, which now makes sense because, put it on Xbox Live Arcade. Why not? That's where all of them go. And Microsoft denied it because what they wanted to do was they wanted to make it a two-player co-op game. And he kept putting his foot down, like you were saying, MusiM, and saying, like, no, it has to control this way and it has to tell the story this way. And eventually Microsoft passed on it because they wanted it to be probably a selling point of Xbox Live. Where it's like, play with your friend, control the brothers, puzzle game, whatever. But he had said that Starbreeze was the only company that really wanted to take a chance on starting to develop it and see where it could go. I thought that was interesting.
It's he's quite a character. Like, I've been debating about through this whole podcast. I'm like, where would be the best place to start shouting "Screw the Oscars"? Like,
right.
But like,
I do think the control scheme did give us some cool moments, especially really early on. You have to take this giant thing and shove it in some gears to make it, stop the gears up. And I like that they basically gave you the moving a couch into your friend's apartment moment where it's like, no, you swing out and then you back up, and there was some cool stuff like that I wasn't really expecting.
There's that one, and then there's I love the tree branches and like the bending stuff, like the putting additional weight on thing to make the other side lower. And having to figure out which person goes which direction in order to actually find the outcome you need. The bed in the cage one, I struggled with that for about 30 minutes because I'm an idiot apparently.
Well, and I think that's this game. I wrote down that this game reminds me of Portal a lot, where for Brothers and Portal, it's both games are so focused on their puzzles, and there's largely just that. Brothers doesn't even have any speech. It has a made-up language. It has no text. There's nothing going on there to distract you from the cinematic storytelling. But in both of those games, I feel like once you get the puzzle and you start executing it, especially for me, where the two brothers were tied together with a rope and they're swinging, like once you get that down, swinging from one to the other and then letting the first one go and swinging to another place, like that felt really good. Like flying that contraption that you had to balance with the two brothers to sort of turn, like that felt really good. A lot of those puzzles feel great.
Yeah, it's surprising how natural it can make that control scheme work, because, like I said, it's not stuff like that, like the moments like the rope swinging and the hang glider and all of these moments like this, they all work beautifully. For me, it was literally I struggled with running from point A to point B.
Yep, me too.
That was where I struggled, where all of a sudden they're doing the crisscrosses and then one's running backwards. Like, no, you run forward. Okay, hands off the controller, recenter the thumbs. Which one is which?
Yeah. That was for me for the entire time.
Was this had to have been one of the first games that did the go to a bench in the world and sit and look at the stuff that's there kind of moments, right? Like,
it might have been, yeah.
I don't remember that happening a lot before that. I'm sure some other game did it before, but
yeah, Life is Strange is the next game I would think of for like taking a rest and looking at the environment.
Yeah. Listening to hipster music.
Yeah. Man, that music's good. Music's good in this game too.
Yes.
Yeah.
I looked up all that stuff too. That's Gustav Gredberg. I have no idea if I'm saying his name right. He's a Swedish dude. I think he's the resident Starbreeze guys because he worked on Chronicles of Riddick, Escape from Butcher Bay, and The Darkness.
Gotcha.
He appears to be partially credited with the sound for A Way Out, and I guess he did that one with Sam Hewlett. So, weird bit of thing I found on the Bandcamp for the soundtrack for this game.
Okay.
Evidently, Simon Victland, the guy who did all the awesome Bionic Commando Rearmed stuff.
Yeah.
Evidently, he provided some additional guitars and quote-unquote instruments.
Instruments. I just have a lot of... I brought a whole truck. There's a lot of instruments with me.
Yeah.
The other
interesting. That's cool.
The other weird thing I found out is Gustav, I guess, in his spare time or maybe growing up in the 80s and 90s, got into what's, I guess, termed an Amiga artist by doing tracker music, which I think is just the kind where you have like the 4 numbers for each instrument and you arrange them, but I could be wrong. I could be entirely wrong.
Interesting. As an early scene kid.
Yeah, but I checked out some of that, and it wasn't bad. It's cool video gaming music, but
yeah,
I don't know. It was a weird little hole I dug into because I'm not familiar with this dude at all or any of his work, so it was just everything was completely new. I'm not familiar with Amiga artists or tracker music, so
yeah, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think I largely liked the art style too.
Just rewind a second here. Let's figure this out. Remastered version on the Xbox One for me.
Mm-hmm. PS4 version for me, which I guess is remastered.
Yeah, it's all up-resed and everything.
Oh, okay.
MusiM?
I originally got it on Steam and played through it, and I might have watched a playthrough for this podcast, maybe.
That's all right. There's no shame in it. That's part of our. That's part of. I did that last month since I had already played last day of June.
So I've not seen the remastered version. Is that just a graphics update?
Yeah, basically.
It's one of those things where it feels like they basically just they basically just re-rendered everything. Like they didn't go in and redo every single asset to make it like super HD. It just felt like, let's just put a splash of smoothing around everything and figure out how it goes.
I know it's not this easy, but if it was easy, they just, instead of exporting a 720p, they export a 1080p, and I was like, hey, it works, all right.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I think largely it looks pretty good. I think the world looks interesting. Lighting looks pretty good. I think most stuff looks pretty good in the game. There's some stuff here and there where it's sort of like, that looks a little weird, but all right.
Yeah, I think they do it actually. One thing I love about mix of the art style and the game design is they do a good job of building the world and visual storytelling. Like you said, there's no text, there's no talk, there's no nothing. And then all of a sudden you meet in a cave troll and you're running through this Valley of the Giants where everybody is like clearly in a big massive fight. And it's like, well, that arrow is about the size of a house. So how bad was it?
I mean,
that... Oh, go ahead,
it really
MusiM.
is kind of a tour of the world type game. Like, like you have those movies where they just go through a country and this and that, and they call it kind of a tourist movie. And that's kind of how I felt about this game in general, just because you get all those cool different scenes and scenarios with characters that are only in that portion of the game. Like the weird cave troll guy and his girlfriend's story arc was freaking awesome.
Yep.
I love that,
Yeah.
I love the damsel in distress where you have to do the blood statue.
Yes.
And then what that damsel turns out to be.
Yeah, there was a moment where you're going through that town and you're hiding from like that invisible giant thing. And she leaps across a chasm and I was like, wait a minute, that's not... What is she?
The thing that ticked me off to it was when you cut down the tree to cross the chasm. She runs across it on all fours, like a haunted house villain from like Japanese movies.
Interesting.
Like she's just like, she's like,
Right.
wait
a tick. Yeah, I noticed she had like done a backflip off of it, but I didn't notice the all fours. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she turns out to be a spider, and that was like, I feel like as soon as you start that area, like that back half of the game, it's sort of like, oh, there's all these people fighting. Oh, the rivers are kind of bloody. Oh, we're moving these people's bodies. Oh, I totally shot that guy in the head and chopped that guy's leg off. This is getting darker than I was expecting.
Yep.
And then it goes, well, worse.
Yep.
She turns out to be a spider lady, and then you rip off all of her legs, and she stabs the big brother, which I guess probably should have seen coming, but...
Yeah, I'll be honest, that was one of the things where when that happened, I was like, oh, so we're leaning into all of the fantasy tropes in this one then. Okay.
Right.
I mean, they should have learned at the start. It's called Brothers. It's bros before hoes, guys. Come on.
Right. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Just waiting for him to whip out like a glowing sword.
Yep. And a little vial of light.
Yeah. I feel like that, starting when he gets stabbed, is like this slow motion train crash you kind of can't stop watching, because it's like, all right, we're gonna get to that tree where we got to get something for our sick dad, so
I just refer to it as the water of life.
Yeah, so like maybe we can get that for the brother, and then nope, he totally dead.
And guess what?
Yep.
You get to move the body.
Yep.
Yeah, and like bury it too, which is just heartbreaking.
Yeah, for me it was like, okay, so we're gonna go full on Snake Eater on this.
Yes,
make
you need to do
the bad thing.
Pull the trigger, Snake.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like, okay,
well,
great.
In an interview with Joseph Ferris, he said that I guess when he was 7 or something like that, like he was in Lebanon, right, with his mom, and his mom, I guess, gave birth to a baby that passed, and she gave him the task of burying the kid.
Oh, yikes.
Oof.
So that is evidently where that came from.
Yeah.
Yep.
Woof. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes this game even rougher.
I mean, it makes you wonder, like, too. I don't know anything about the war stuff that was going on in Lebanon at the time, I don't think, but it makes you wonder, like, how much of the dead giants and everything everywhere is kind of inspired by whatever war-torn environment you might have grown up in. But
yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, and then at the end, you sort of go home alone, and you do all the puzzles alone that you had to do together.
Which, that's the moment where he gets to the water, and you're told throughout the entirety of the game, he can't swim. He needs his big brother to swim. And so it sticks you in this pool of water, and like you're moving around with the right stick, nothing's working. You're trying to figure out what's going on, because at this point, your left stick is completely gone. Your left trigger doesn't do anything, because Big Brother is now underground back at the Tree of Life. Mm-hmm. And it's this great thing where it's just like, well, what am I supposed to do? Did you guys play with headphones or audio? Because I know, Boston, you have a tendency to not play with audio a lot.
I play with headphones.
Because I don't know if you guys heard it, but the Big Brother is whispering over the audio track at that time.
Oh, wow. I never noticed, no.
And then as soon as you pull that left trigger and do the Big Brother action instead of the Little Brother one, and he starts to swim, the Big Brother speaks to you as you're actually swimming, like giving words of encouragement.
Oh, man. Heartbreaking.
Yes. And that's a great moment. Like, this is, I'll be honest, this is a very average game for me that has been lifted up.
Yeah.
Because of a couple of really, really great moments.
Yeah.
And that is one of those moments.
I mean, it's really all about the last 20 minutes of the game, right? Like, it's about the time you had before, getting used to having that stick, and then losing that character associated with those buttons. And then it just salt in the wound from there. Like, just like having the game end with the dad crying on the ground. I mean,
yeah, just credits. And it's just like, oh man.
Like I'm kind of smiling right now. It's because it's such a terrible, horrible, like, it's incomprehensible to me. It's like so bad that it makes me want to laugh. I know that makes me probably terrible, but like,
yes, MusiM, you are the worst person.
But it's, but you know, like in the moment, like I very much just even rewatching it, like I was teary eyed, you know, looking at it.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with you, Moon. I think overall, for like all of the time except for the 20 minutes, it's a pretty average game, and certainly not bad. Not like best game of all time. I think the story is I agree, is what elevates it. There's a lot of really fun moments that I feel like we don't get a lot in video games, where you're like, both brothers can interact with someone and they both do something different, and that's not in service of anything. It's just they're saying hi, and that's you can tell that this was really driven by someone who's not typically making games, where it's like they don't give you a collectible or more health. It's just a person playing a harp. Like
the only purpose it has is to bring you closer into the world, kind of thing, which most people wouldn't see that as a purpose. It's like the old Deus Ex games. Like, one of the reasons people love the Deus Ex games is because you can literally pick everything up and just throw it around if you have the appropriate skills to do so. Yeah. It's like, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, so Big Brother's going to show the scroll, and Little Brother's going to do little wavy hand motion. Right. And then, depending on what you do, like, the sleeping guy is a prime example of that for me. It's the guy who's asleep on like a bench, and you need him to open a gate to go past. Yep. And I didn't interact with him with the Big Brother first, which I regret. But the Little Brother just picks up a bucket and tosses this bucket of water all over the guy.
It's like, good because the Big Brother just like taps him on the shoulder, and the guy on the bench like waves him off and nods back off. It's really good. Where it's like, I don't care, man. I'm tired.
But it's stuff like that with like the random people with like, I hate to say this, I'm achievement hunter. Mm-hmm. So I went back in after I'd beaten the game, jumped in, did a couple of chapter selects to tidy up the couple of achievements I missed. One of them was the stealing of the basketball and throwing it down a well.
Oh, jeez.
So it's chapter 1 as you're going through the town. There's a little girl playing basketball, and when I first played through it, I picked it up. I played catch with the two brothers and the girls, like throwing it to each other, and then she'd take the shot. There's an achievement for throwing it down the well, but only the little brother will throw it down the well. The big brother won't do it.
That's great.
And then as soon as you do that, the girl bursts in tears and just stands there crying.
And the only thing you can do is just leave.
Yeah, and the end of the achievement description is shame on you.
Great.
That's amazing.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think largely it's a game that I enjoyed. I think a lot of the puzzles felt really good, and I think largely they were pretty obvious. In sort of a good way, where I felt like, okay, yeah, I can play around with this a little bit. All right, now I know how to do this. But overall, I think it was a really solid game. I think to come back to Mr. Shoemaker, had I played it in 2013, probably on my top 10 list, but probably not number 1.
Yeah. Can you name 10 games better than Brothers this year?
Probably not. Not in 2019, that's for sure.
I keep all those lists. I could probably look that up, because I'm pretty certain I did play that. Like, that year I was kind of vindictive. Like, someone would say something and be like, I'm going to hate play this thing now. But, like...
Yeah. You loved it? Oh, I'm going to love it, sure.
I did wind up liking Brothers, but I think 2013 was a good year.
Hey, at least if you're being vindictive, you play it before you start slamming it. You don't just start slamming it before you play it.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a reason I've read all of the Twilight books. Know thine enemy.
Right. I'm pulling out my top 10 for 2013. MusiM, how did you feel about this at the end of the day?
Overall, I liked it. Like, honestly, it's one of those games that I think would be at a perfect price point at $5 to $10. I think because it's only 2 to 4 hours, I think anyone who is a fan of emotional storytelling in video games should give it a shot. Just because it's such a, if you're looking at 1 to 2 sessions at most, and you're going to get an interesting world to look at, even if the graphics are a bit dated, like the graphics style, I think, at this time.
Also, for achievement hunters, it's a quick 1,000, just so you know.
There you go.
I think it's worth your time. I don't know if it'd be worth $20, but I'm also kind of stretching my pennies at the moment, so that might be where some of that attitude's coming from.
Right.
I think in 2013, $20 is a good price for it.
Yeah.
I think 5-6 years later, probably a little bit on the expensive side.
Yeah.
And it was in Game Pass. It's not anymore, which is unfortunate. So I lost out on that front, but that's fine. Like, we picked it up, we played it. I think if it goes on sale, pick it up, because it's a good enough experience to go through it the once. And like MusiM said, it's 2 sittings.
Yeah.
It's sit down, play it for a couple of hours, sit down, play it for a couple of hours, and you're done.
Yeah. 4 hours max, really.
Yeah. It's inventive. Like, it does things differently, and considering we've had 2 or 3 shoot-em-up looters drop already in 2019, the fact that this does something different is actually a very good thing.
Yeah, it's refreshing.
So here's how much of a jerk I was in 2013. So I did, in fact, beat it in 2013, and I turned in a top 9 list.
Oh, man.
Did not include it.
Wow.
Oh, so MusiM can name 9 better games than Brothers.
Right, exactly.
Just a little pedantic on my part.
I just looked at my top 10 list for 2013. My number 2 was Saints Row 4, and all I wrote was turbo dumb, super great, that's Saints Row 4. And we talked about this last week on TVGP. That was the year I gave my Game of the Year to BioShock Infinite, which was a wrong choice. That past me was bad. That was not a good choice.
Honestly, that was a game that was easy to get swept away in the hype with.
Yeah.
Like, it was a game that, on the face of it, it presented itself very well.
Yeah.
But is a very average game. It's no BioShock 2.
I put it very high because I liked 1999 mode mostly.
I don't.
And no one played it. So that was a bummer. Just like no one played BioShock 2. Go play BioShock 2. It's great.
I still liked Infinite, but I don't think it was a game changer or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It did some solid sort of storytelling. I'll give it credit there.
Yeah.
Again, 2013, the year of the video game story.
Yeah.
Okay, this is my shame. Like, I put BioShock Infinite above Sleeping Dogs on my list. That is a solid mistake.
Yeah. Hindsight would have changed a lot. Yeah. All right, let's talk about our next game voted by you, the patrons, winning by a landslide. Super hot. Platforms that came out on PC, including 2 PC VR platforms, OS X, Linux, Xbox One, and PS4, and the Super Hot VR also came out on PSVR.
Yep.
So, from what I understand, Super Hot VR is a little bit of a different game. The structure of it is a little bit different to fit VR, but it's largely more Super Hot. It's not like the other thing, the roguelike Super Hot. That's something different. So thankfully, not a narrative-driven, super bummer video game, as far as I know.
It's about hackers, so it's going to go down that road eventually. You know it, and I know it.
That's fair, yeah. So we will reconvene in a month to talk about Super Hot. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.